everybody, Dad brought the Beetle over so that I could finish up his upholstery. I'm starting with the rear seats first and then working my way forward. I figured the rear would be the hardest for me, so I'm going to start in the back of the car. But, you know, those black high backs just gotta go, so can't wait to get started on those. We didn't have the real 55 lower portion of the back seat, so we took one from a 59 parts car that we have, and it really shouldn't have fit because the width is different, but it just dropped right in, so that was great. And I don't really give a whole lot of an intro here once I start. I just kind of jump right in like I do most things, so you'll have to bear with me. I know it's going to be a bit boring, but I hope that I'm here to help someone with a few tips and tricks on kind of knocking out your own seat upholstery. It's my kind of machine if it takes oil. Getting a little squeak up here. Get that tab out of my way. Add a little bit in there too. So the original seat had kind of like a tuck in the back seat, the bench part and the backrest part of the seat. I am not going to do that because I am working with 60-inch, well, 54-inch wide fabric. So I'm kind of creating a false tuck where I've got a little bit of batting, quilting batting in between, and then just a piece of canvas on the back side. So I've stitched one run down, and then I've come over 2.5. That's what the original one measured, and I'm just going to stitch from the top side on this one. This one here was stitched from the bottom side. So I think it's easier to keep the line straight if you're working from the top side. So that's the plan on this one. There'll be 3 of those. The reason that the original seat, let me walk you out there real quick. So here's that original Bedford cord rear seat. It's pretty incredible that we have as much of it as we do. But if I can get back in here and show you, they didn't have 54 or 60-inch wide fabric, and so they had to hide their seam. So you can see here, there's 2 pieces of fabric sewed together right there. Here, it's just a false tuck on this side. And then they kind of did the same thing I'm doing by putting the cotton in between. So basically, this back seat was sewn in 3 sections. 1, 2, and 3. And the reason they did that was just because the manufacturer didn't make the fabric in the width that they needed, so they put the tucks in. And ironically enough, it kind of just became a feature of these types of seats. So there's another tuck here. And so obviously those are 14 inches apart, and there's another tuck right over in here. So I'm just mimicking the placement of where those are, and I think it'll be fine. So still quite a bit to do on this, but I think that's gonna work. I got that place there pulled a little bit, but I think that is gonna be just fine. So once the seat is tight on there, the cover is tight, I believe, all of these little places will just pull right out. And I used a water-soluble pencil, so you're seeing some of my marks there. But I think that looks pretty good. So I've done a couple of other upholstery things on my channel, but I just wanted to mention again, I've got correct front sides of the fabric facing each other. It's kind of hard to tell on this fabric, but there is a right and wrong side on it. This side that I have up on the front panel it kind of has a wax coating on it, and you can see this is the surface that's exposed. It's slightly darker. So I want the like sides to face each other. So I've got like to like. My piping, then, the rib of my piping is turned in, and the inseam edge of my piping is out. And I have found it much easier to just staple, and I have modified my staplers so that I can get close on the turns. But I just staple along the edge. I am allowing 3/4 of an inch inseam on this piece because it's slightly enlarged. I made it a little bit bigger. My piping is pretty much dead on 1/2 inch, and then this piece that's on top, that's the front panel, should be about a 1/2 inch in. So I'm lining the piping up with it and then leaving about a 1/4 inch on my main piece of the seat. And I'm just going to staple along the way, sew that up, and put it over there on the seat. One other thing I forgot to mention is I mark the middles of all of the pieces I'm using. The piping actually has a seam right dead in the middle, and I did that on purpose so that I know where that is. The middle of my main sheet, the middle of my front sheet, middle of my piping all line up. And I pin out from each side on the middle. That way, when it wants to walk on itself, because this is kind of fabric that as you pin it, it kind of wants to walk its way out. It's walking its way out to the ends so that you're not getting a bunch up in the middle. So don't start on an edge and work your way in, because at the end, if you just start at the edge and work all the way down, you're going to have about that much of a gap hanging over on one of them. Or you're going to bubble up in the middle if you work end to end. So I start in the middle and work my way out. And because I stapled it, I can just do a test fit before I've sewn anything, just to make sure there's no glaring issue and everything appears to go down pretty well. The only issue I see is it's a little tight in this corner, right down here. I don't think that's going to be a problem. A little bit tight right there. And everything else seems to be fitting pretty well. That turn over there might be a little bit better than this turn here. But all in all, I think I'm going to go with that. Like I said, the corner right there is a little tight, and when I pull on it, it's a little snug down here too. Fabric, unlike vinyl, doesn't have a whole lot of give, so I think we'll be all right. I've done enough of these. I think we can make that work. So let's pull that off. Make sure we have plenty of bobbin thread. We'll go around this here, and then on the bottom there has to be a hem, and there's a piece of wire that runs through there. I'll show you on this piece here. So underneath on the bottom, so this would be the top of the seat. This is the seat part. They sew, of course I grabbed a piece, there's a piece. They sew a pocket and put in a little piece of wire in there. And that way when they get to the corners, they can twist it and make it tight around the bottom of that box. Alright, let's get that sewed. I probably will just do the hem after I've sewed the top part. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sew the hem after I've sewed the top part, we'll sew the hem and then put the wire in it, and this bottom of the back seat will be done. Just wanted to mention I did put piping in these seats. Early seats, I'm going to say 52, 53 and before, didn't have piping on the seats. It was just a straight stitch. I used piping, and here's why. If I use a zipper foot, it gives me a really nice guide for my needle, and I can get a real tight stitch. A zipper foot versus a regular presser foot, you'll notice that the needle goes right up against my piping edge. I don't know if you can see the edge of that or not, but there's a bead. That's what makes my piping. If I put this one down, you can see every time I make a stitch, my needle is coming one tooth width or one presser foot nodule width away from my piping, whereas this needle goes right next to it. Makes a lot tighter stitch. So I've got that cover all on there, and I have sewed down the length of this a little pocket, and in that pocket is wire. So I've got wire there, and there should be one in here. Oh, got him tucked back behind there. I have to get that out of there. There he is. So these two wires then, you can't see anything. These two wires then get twisted together. And there's a wire in here because Volkswagen did this really cool thing with their seats. if you can see that or not, but these sharp medieval looking torture devices sticking up off the seats. You basically take the wire up and over and poke it through the fabric and then hammer those down, so that you don't have to put staples or anything like that in the seat. So I have pulled all these up. You have to be kind of careful with them. They tend to want to pop off the welds if you bend them back. I've managed, now that I've opened my big mouth, I'll probably break one putting it on, but I have managed to pull all of those up without breaking any of them. So we're going to tuck that seat around there, flip it over, and I'll show you what it looks like. Well, this is kind of what I have for a finished seat. And of course, once the back of the seat is on, I don't think any of that will show. And then here's the sides. I think that looks pretty good. Hopefully he's happy with that. And then back here on the corner, this kind of had to turn, make that turn to go back in. But I think that will work just fine. This rear seat bottom is kind of racked. It was in a car that was wrecked. So those sides aren't exactly the same, and actually this piece right here is a little bit too big, but it won't show, and I don't really feel like ripping it back out. So I'm going to leave well enough alone. You can actually see, maybe you can, if you're looking down the line, it actually is twisted. It goes kind of that way. So it's fine once it's in the car, but it is definitely not the same on both sides. And there's a little boo-boo dad welded a place on it right here. But that will sit down in the tray, and I think you won't even see that. So that one's done. Alright, I'm going to move on to the backrest portion of the back seat. And looks like, I think there's probably enough pattern here for me to make a pattern. Enough of the old material left. So I'm just going to take apart, I probably won't even have to use a seam ripper. I'm guessing this will just kind of pull apart. But threads are all dry rotted, so it'll just pull apart. Take this all apart and lay it out on my fabric. And it looks like there was piping on the front row here, and then the stitch in the back is just stitched on top. So we'll try to mimic that the best we can. And then on the back of these, there's a kind of like a masonite board on the back, and they stitched through the top side and down the sides, and then it looks like the back just kind of tucked in there up under, and it doesn't appear to be attached anywhere. And then the fabric just loops over and hits each one of these little spikes, and that's what holds the bottom of the masonite board down. So there are 3 holes drilled in the back. We'll try to replace those. I'm not sure what strips were here. Looks like there was a metal strip there maybe. So I will rely on Dad to figure that out, because I don't know what was there. But yeah, clean this up and get that pattern off, and we can get started on that one. Then I'm glad that we have what we have, because the seat kind of does this. Newer seats didn't have that attachment to the side of the car. The older ones did. So I will need this pattern here. I'm glad we have that. It looks like that's hand stitched there. Not even machine stitched, so they've hand stitched. They've machine stitched to here, and then this is hand stitched. Oh my. On the inside of that back panel, it looks like the Bedford cord came in, and they've stitched it to the back card as well. On both sides there's a square cut out of that one, and I can't tell if that's a mouse square cutout. They've obviously built a nest in the back of the seat, so can't really tell on that. Seat's in pretty good condition though. I'll clean it up a little bit and we will hose it down, and I'll paint it. The parts that are going to be seen I'll paint. Probably just leave the rest of it. Maybe paint that bar that's along the back there just to keep the rust from coming through on his seat upholstery, but it doesn't look that bad rust wise. My bus seats had holes in them I had to weld. So we'll go ahead and get that cleaned up, and hopefully I got enough stuff here to figure out what I gotta build. What a mess. Alright, I think probably the rest of that, get my mask down. We can get out of there with a hose, just spray it. I think it'll come out. So let's take it out, spray it off, let it sit out in the sun for a few minutes, and then I'll slap some paint on it. Here's what we took out of the seat. Those mice sure do love that horsehair and seat batting, don't they? I think Volkswagens must be their favorite. It's kind of late in the evening, but I think I let that sit out here for maybe about an hour. That'll get dry enough to paint. Came off pretty well. I'm not going to do much better if I spend time just picking every strand out. I mean, overall, it's hosed off, it's cleaned off, should be fine. There's a few little fur balls back here, but much better than it was. And hopefully it won't stink, although it didn't smell bad before. So we'll let that drip dry and come back out and spray paint it real quick, and then I can carry it in for the evening. And that way, come tomorrow when I'm ready to do a test fit on this piece, we'll be ready to go. Well, this is the shredded mess I'm left to work with. I really do feel like there's enough there. There's everything but the turn. So I should be able to kind of piece that together. And then I think what I'm going to do, because this half here is actually pretty decent, I'm just going to split it down the middle, flip this side over so that I can make that side that's all chewed up over there. And then the pieces that are on each end that get sewn to the card, it looks to me like the part that's ripped off actually is still on the card. So I just need to add maybe ½ inch or so onto the edges of those, I think. Because that one was actually still kind of sewn on there on the back. So that should be everything we need. And then on that top edge, I'm going to add a little spare, more than ½ inch up there, just in case I miscalculate a little bit. So I think I might actually have enough. I was going to reuse that metal strip in there too, but I think I'm just going to find a piece here in the garage to replace it. It's pretty rusty in the middle. It's about to break right there in the middle, so find another piece to replace that. Yeah, I'm happy with how much of it is actually still there. Now to get this pleat to kind of pop up like that, I have sewed one side where the bobbin side, your bottom stitch becomes your top stitch, and then I've measured over and sewed the other one on the top stitch. And what that is actually causing the fabric to do, if I can demonstrate it here or not, but it's kind of pooching itself up naturally, and that's popping it up just a little bit more than it would if I just sewed them both the same direction. So that's working out a little bit better. I did that on the bottom part of the seat too. So this is kind of how I have it set up. I have a line drawn inside on the fabric, right under this line that I've drawn on my backer piece, my piece of cotton canvas. And I've lined those two lines up all the way down. And you see I've pulled my pins out slightly from my line. that will give enough room for my presser foot to just go slide right past them, so I don't have to pull pins as I'm sewing, and the machine will just go right past them. If the needle comes down close to one, it'll just shove the pin the other way, and it usually won't cause any issue. I have broke needles before hitting a pin, but it's worth taking the risk to keep the fabric straight. So you can see I'm on the back side, that being the right side, the correct side of the upholstery fabric. I'm on the back side. I'm going to do this first one on the back side. I'm going to flip it over and sew the second one on the top side. Now I'm using a water-soluble marking pencil to mark my white line. You can see it pretty good in camera, not so good in person. So that's what I'm using. And then you just take a damp towel and just go along, and it comes right off. They make a blue one too, but the white one was the one I was able to get my hands on. Well, I got the backrest portion of the back seat all kind of just painted up. It's not perfect. I just basically wanted to get some paint on it to keep the rust out of the fabric I was working on. Sorry, getting a glare there. But I'm going to do a test fit real quick before I continue on with this. This is the hardest one to make because I had so little to work with as far as a pattern. I felt like kind of like a ancient historian or something trying to recreate a relic. So let me get the foam on that and put the fabric on, and we'll do a quick test fit. This is kind of why I like to do a test fit, because I'm working with shreds. This piping should be up on this upper ridge. So I'm about 2 inches too much in length and just near perfect on my width. So if I bring that back down to where that is supposed to be, this wraps and tucks back up under the seat. So that is perfect. But my distance this way needs to come in just a hair. So that's going to be tricky, because as I make the turn, I'm going to have to make sure I leave the upper part exactly as it is, and then as I turn, I need to come in just a hair. So, a little more than a hair actually, but let me undo the staples on the sides. You know, stapling it is a pain, but it's a lot easier to undo staples than it is to undo stitching. That's why I like to do test fitting. So I've got that front piece all sewed together. My pleats are in there. I am sewing it to the Masonite card and defying gravity. If you haven't seen this machine sew through Masonite card, please check out the video up above, and I'll show you how it does just plow right through that. Here it is with the back bottom part of the seat, and then here it is in the car. And then these are actually my dad's senior cords. And notice the Volkswagen. Thanks for watching, everyone. We have just the front seats left to finish on this one, and I'll catch you on the next one.